What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here today to talk about 6 key comic book issues that have basically completely reset their prices to before the comic boom. Things like this always interest me because it makes me think, maybe have they overcorrected, or are they going to keep correcting, and potentially might be a good time to hop in. Now, I'm not running out and buying any of these books. Obviously, do your own research, make your own purchase decisions, that whole thing. But if you're mildly interested in any of these particular issues, maybe just put them on your radar and let's see if they continue to overcorrect. One of these I actually own. A couple of them I'm interested in. A couple of them I'm completely not interested in just because I'm not super tied to the character. But we'll go ahead and get into it here in a second. Off the top, as of time of recording, which is Sunday afternoon, the Stranger Things cards have gone up on Netflix's website. They are still in stock. They've been up for a couple days. 11,000 blasters, 11,111 blasters were manufactured for this. There's no autos or anything in it, but there is some cool looking parallels. They do look very similar to the National cards, but there are some differences, so you will be able to tell the difference between the National cards and this. The National ones have zero cool up here, and I think the outline is a little bit different. And then there's these poster-looking cards and some parallels and all sorts of other stuff. So if you're interested in it, I just thought I'd mention it really quickly that they are still in stock. I bought 8 boxes, I believe. I'm going to rip a couple and maybe sit on a couple. I'm not 100% sure yet. My guess is the cards are going to look really cool, and I'm going to end up ripping all of them. $50 is a little expensive, and this is still a precursor to the main set release. But I thought they were cool-looking cards, so I went ahead and grabbed a couple boxes. We'll see what happens. Like I said, at time of recording, these are still in stock. I would assume they sell out at some point in time since it is kind of a limited release. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into the main topic. Now, a couple of these books I have hinted at / talked about before when looking at comic book pricing, but I kind of wanted to dump them all into one list, and some of them have continued to correct since I've talked about them in previous videos. First one, ASM 101. First appearance of Morbius. Obviously, the movie on this tanked, was not good. I still haven't even actually seen it yet. And it was a victim of the comic boom as well. Combination effect with the movie coming out gave it a little extra juice. For the purposes of this exercise, I looked at grades that pretty much had a lot of recent sales. Like this book in a 9.8 doesn't sell very often. In an 8.5, it actually had some recent sales and has had 9 sales in the last 90 days. So that's kind of my logic as we move across these different books on how I settled on the grade that I chose. But when you look at this graph here, this is a correction. Whoa, boy. We can see way back in 2018, this was going for around $500. The movie got announced and it reset up to, or jumped, rather not reset, up to $1,000. And then it kind of sat there forever. It dipped back down again, went up, down, but basically sat around that $800 to $1,000. Then we get into comic book boom time, and then it spikes way up. This book got all the way up to $2K. Movie obviously tanked. Comic book market has corrected. And now it has dropped all the way back down again to the most recent sales at $800. We have a $800 and an $856 for our 2 November sales. So we are at the low point after its spike at around that $800 mark and creeping. You know, we're not all the way back to 2018 level prices. I don't think it'll get back to 2018 level prices, but we are fully, this book has 100% fully reset itself back to 2018 prices, which is wild. Does it go cheaper? Obviously, I have no idea. Would that be considered an overcorrection if it continues to drop more? Or is just resetting back to the movie announcement price way back in 2018 a fair price to get into this for? I am not the biggest Morbius guy in the world. He's a whatever character to me. Spider-Man, obviously a hugely popular character. I am more of an X-Men guy than a Spider-Man guy. This isn't one that I'm necessarily like terribly after, but if one popped up at a very reasonable price, I would consider getting in on it. You know, before the movie announcement stuff, you could see this was going for 500 and then 300. And then as you begin to work back, 200, 100, we're going way back now. But generally speaking, this book had a very nice, and this is the thing that I like about classic key books, is you generally see very nice, even, steady returns over time, you know, factoring out the nonsense that we all went through the last couple years. But if you look at this, you know, $100 here, 155 here, 225 here, you know, 200, 300. You can see it just slowly keeps on leveling itself up. 400, little bounce there up to 5-6, and then it really went nuclear there, and then took off even more with the comic boom, but then it's reset back. So I don't know. This is a pretty big key book for Spider-Man, and not huge, but it's a key book for Spider-Man. This price is starting to intrigue me. Yeah, and plus I have a trigger finger on anything under $1,000. If one of these popped up and it was a good deal, I'd probably want to pay less than 800 right now, honestly. Just with the current market that we're in and everything, in an 8.5, and this got down to like $700, I'd be very tempted to pull the trigger on it in an 8.5. You know, and an 8.5 is a pretty respectable grade in this. On the CGC side of things, let's see where that peaks out. 385. It's on the right side of the curve that I like to be on. If you're not familiar with that, when I look at these older books, the first thing that I look at is the CGC census and see where it peaks. This peaks in a 7.0 at 489 is the highest census count grade. And then I like to try to be on the north side of that. I want to be on the upper. I want to be above whatever the peak grade is, just depending on what my price point is that I want to get into it for. So an 8.5, pretty decently up there. You know, when you get into the 9s, it starts getting pretty limited pretty quick, especially at 9.2s and above. But an 8.5 seems like a pretty fair grade on that. That's one that I kind of have my eye on. Here's the second one. Marvel Special Edition, Masters of Kung Fu. This is the first appearance of Shang-Chi. I know this movie gets a little bit of a weird rap. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought the character was pretty fun. I like the power set with the cool rings. There's some weird stuff in there for sure. It wasn't a perfect movie, but the fight scenes and stuff were really good, especially at the beginning of the movie on the bus and stuff, and on the side of the building. This in a 9.4, currently going for around $1,000. We have a November sale at $10.50, October at around $12.60, $11.65, and October at $1,000. But generally speaking, in that $1,000 range. This is another one. This peaked way up with the movie nonsense / comic boom. And then we could see here that this is basically reset down to kind of its lull period, back to 2020 pricing. Not quite there yet, but it's creeping. You can see some stuff here around 800. Here it peaked up to 1350, then dipped down again, 770, 800, 945. Then it starts going up and up. With movie and comic boom kind of all simultaneously happening as well. But at around $1,000, I'm starting to get a little intrigued, especially in a 9.4. Once again, we'll kind of look at the census here. I didn't have this stuff pre-pulled up. But a 9.4 on this book definitely puts it in the upper tier of gradings as well in regards to the CGC census. 483 is the peak grade and an 8.5, and then it starts to thin out. So a 9.4 is pretty good. You only have a few hundred above you on the census, no 9.9s. A decent amount of 9.8s. Not a super rare book or anything by that means, but key character, and I think he's going to be important going forward. I really do. There's no projects currently announced with him. Does he get a second movie? I mean, they announced that they didn't firm announce. They hinted at it in the movie. But I do think we see him again, and I think he's going to be an important part of the Avengers going forward. We kind of saw Wong and Hulk bringing him into the fold in the post-credit scenes of his movie. And I could see him popping back up again for sure. But this one does kind of intrigue me a little bit. A little bit. Next up, this one 1,000% intrigues me. There's an auction running today at time of recording that ends later tonight that I'm keeping a very close eye on and may dive in on it. It's a little bit of a higher grade than I possibly want to get into, but I'm going to see where it ends at. That is X-Men 101. First appearance of the Phoenix and a absolutely iconic cover. The color on this, I mean, obviously this is a reprint version, but just generally speaking, just an absolutely gorgeous presenting cover on X-Men 101. A mega key in the X-Men world, in my opinion, with the first appearance of Phoenix, just as critical as that storyline is to the X-Men in general. But this is another one that is really reset. CGC 96, you could see this got a little bit of buzz around I believe the last X-Men movie that was not good. Not good. But then it dipped back down again around that $1,000. You know, there's an 1,100, 1,200, 1,300-ish range here back in 2020. Through most of 2020, it kind of sat in that $1,100 to $1,300 range. Obviously, prior to that, it was $1,500, $1,600, and then, you know, you dip back down back into 2017, 2018. But then you could see during peak comic boom, this thing gets a little nutty. Got all the way up to 3,600, 3K, 3K, 26, 3K, and then has just fallen off a cliff. And the last one in November did 1,560. Then prior to that, back in August, was 1,750. So a pretty wide gap here. That's a hell of a dive. I mean, look at this. This thing fell off a cliff fast. 3,000, 3,000, 3,000. That was on July 14th. July 31st, 1,600. Followed up by a 1,700, followed up by a 1,500. This will be over by the time you guys and girls see this. But on Sunday afternoon, there is a 9.6 at auction. At time of recording, it's at like $1,350. I am strongly considering going after that book. We'll see what happens and if I get it or not. I have wanted a 101 for a really long time. I was originally considering going for like a 9.2 or a 9.4. That range. I didn't think a 9.6 was going to be in the cards. But if I could get it for around that $1,500 price point, I was hoping it would go lower. I don't like that it's already at $370 right now with some time to go, but we'll see what happens. Here's the census on this one. This book peaks out at an 8.5 with a 9 right next to it at 620 and 621 on the census. A 9.6, there's 401 of them and only 163 in a 9.8. This book in a 9.8 still commands a pretty hefty premium. I believe it's still going for, $6K in a 9.8. I would never want to spend that on a 9.8 on this book. There's just other big things that I would want. But you could see basically that 5 to 6K range, 54, 5, and 58. And also the 9.8 did not price correct nearly as hard. Definitely some super high sales, but mostly sat around that 6 to 7K range. There were some 8K sales. So I guess that did correct pretty decently when you really do look at it. This is one that I have always wanted and may go after. So full disclosure on that one, by the time you are watching this video, I may own a copy of this, depending on what this ends up going for. But this is, once again, X-Men Mega Key. This book is always going to be very important. And the fact that in a 9.6, it fell off the cliff like this. I mean, just straight plateaued, and you're on the other side of the plateau. This is exactly what I'm looking for right now in big key comic books, is this. Let me see that reset. Next one, Werewolf by Night 32, first appearance of Moon Knight. We are going to look at this in a CGC 8.0. Very similar thing to what we saw with the X-Men 101. This book back in early 2020 was going for about $1,500, $1,600, $1,200 in that price range. Currently, we're not quite all the way back there yet. We were almost getting there. You can see it got down to 1,700. There's a 1,600, 1,700. And then it looks like Moon Knight's possibly going to be coming back. So I think it juiced this back up a little bit. So it's kind of trending in the wrong direction, but this is one. It has not fully reset yet. I kind of forced this one onto the list. but it's another one that I'm kind of keeping my eye on. I'm not super attached to the Moon Knight character. This would probably be the one I would be least likely to buy on this entire list, but I did want to include it because he potentially has a future in the MCU. I actually really enjoyed that show quite a bit, but it looks like this one might be trending back up again slightly, so we might have to wait a little bit longer on this one, but it is one that has come way down from its all-time highs during the comic boom, and which also that show kind of tied directly in with the show coming out and the comic boom kind of all happening at the same time. Next up, I do own a copy of this book, Uncanny X-Men 282. This is the first appearance of Bishop. Not a very expensive book here at all as we move into more of the 90s era here. But another one that has really reset back to its old pricing. If we go back to, this is early 2020. This was going for about $100, $100, $120, $130. And then if we look at some recent sales here in 2022, 165, 120, 160, 165, 140, 125, all November sales. Not a rare book by any means. It is not a mega key in regards to the X-Men, but it is a more popular X-Men character with the first appearance of Bishop. If you're a big X-Men collector, it's kind of one that you need. And at around, if you can get this thing for $100, I think that's a very fair price to get into this on if this is one that you've always been looking for. This particular book will always hold special meaning to me. This is one of the first books that I bought off of the spinner rack when I first started collecting comics. I don't remember. I think it was this one. I think I bought all these at the same time because they were all on the rack at the same time. But I walked into comic books at Uncanny X-Men 281, 282, and Jim Lee X-Men #1. You could not pick a more perfect time to join the comic book community than those books sitting on your newsstand shelf. So one that is fully reset, like I said, a very cheap and easy book to find. Don't overpay for this. But this did get all the way up to $400 during the comic boom. And on the CGC census, there are quite a bit of these. Let me pull it up really quick. Yeah, 1,700 in a 9.8 with 2,200 in a 9.6. Anything in the 90s, even the late 80s and newer, you definitely want to stick to CGC 9.8s in my opinion. Last but not least, one that I do not own, but I have always wanted to own. This one is 1,000% on my radar. I'm in just no hurry to get it because these are readily available and continue to slip down, but it is one that has reset. This is ASM 361, classic Mark Bagley cover, first appearance of Carnage, classic Spider-Man cover, mega Spider-Man key for a modern book, and once again, one that has fully reset. During its peak, this was averaging $1,200. It is currently down to around $420. Prior to things going crazy, we look at 2019, 360, 382, 380, 450 as we move into 2020, and then, movie stuff and comic boom happens. Here's some recent sales on this one. 425, 358, 392, 475, 410, 361, 375. If I could get one of these for like 300, 350, I would pull the trigger on it. There's actually one on my slabs that I've had my eye on that was listed for 425. The guy dropped it to 400. I offered 300 at auto decline. I didn't think that would get the job done. But one that I have always wanted to get, once again, kind of like Uncanny X-Men 281, not rare at all. Do not overpay for this book. There are 5,500 in a CGC 9.8, followed up with 8,500 in a 9.6. Not a rare book at all, but it always has pretty decent demand. It never should have got to these crazy prices of $1,200 a piece, but just like sports cards, comic books went a little nutty too. That being said, it is still one that I would like to own. It's actually the last book that I am kind of missing in my little symbiote collection. I have Secret Wars 8, ASM 252, ASM 300, ASM 316, and I am missing this one as kind of the last of that little grouping that I need to get my hands on. But like I said, it's not a rare book. you could kind of be patient on it. But the fact that this is reset all the way back to 2019 prices in some cases, hell, even 2017 prices in some cases, feels like maybe this one's overcorrecting a little bit. And this one may even dip a little bit lower just because of the amount of supply on the market for this. It's not rare, but it is one that is 100% on my radar. So that's all I have for you guys and girls today. Curious, which one of these are you most intrigued by? And is there one that I missed that you're seeing out there that was one that the price is completely reset on? Let me know in the comments down below. We will catch you guys and girls on the next one. Peace.